We've had 5 winter storms forecast for this week, and I have done a lot to try and prepare the garden. Fingers crossed that I'm going to bring some of my winter crops through. It's not a guarantee. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all of my citrus trees inside and keep them in my living room for the next week. Right now, they're behind me in this high tunnel hoop house. That's not going to be enough for the temperatures that we're anticipating. The lime trees, the lemon trees will not make it if I don't bring them inside. What's up, everyone? It's Scott from New Garden Road. You know I'm here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. All right, so here I am in the garden after 6.4 inches of recorded snow, the most in 72 years in Austin, Texas. We've been under sub-freezing temperatures for the last 4 days, since last Friday. As you can see, the garden is completely covered in snow. So people can take a lot of different approaches when they're protecting their vegetable garden in these freezing temperatures. Some people will harvest everything they can. They'll bring it inside, give it away, whatever they have to do. I tried to do a little bit of that, but honestly, there's too much food in this garden for me to even spend the time dealing with in that way. I designed it so that I could have successive crops and I would be able to harvest and eat off of that continually. So we hit probably 7 degrees this morning. That's pretty darn cold. My thinking is these are pretty well established crops with a really deep, healthy root system. They're mulched. They've been given liquid seaweed regularly throughout their growing season, so that should help fortify them. And also I made sure that they were adequately hydrated prior to these freezing temperatures. That's really important. Dry plants don't do well in freezing temperatures. I went a step further and added a second layer of row cover. What I traditionally have used in the garden is a medium duty row cover, which protects plants by 7 to 8 degrees. I found some heavyweight row cover that's said to offer 10 degrees of protection. I used the medium weight and the heavyweight in combination, and then when I didn't have enough, I used the heavyweight row cover on some of the crops that I really wanted to try to protect. I tried to protect all these beds, but I simply ran out of row cover and material to do so. The one right behind me is planted with some fava beans. They don't really look so good. They look kind of dark, kind of black, and that's really a solid indicator that they have been killed by this frost, so I'm not completely surprised by that. Fava beans are one of the more cold hardy vegetables that I have growing out here. They're said to be able to withstand temperatures of 10 degrees. I didn't really expect them to survive, but I thought it was going to be a good experiment. One other thing that I want to mention related to my limited resources is the hoop structures that I build over these raised beds. Typically, I like to put up 5 hoops over a 4x8 raised bed, and that can give it a lot of integrity and support for a variety of materials, whether it be this row cover or 6mm plastic or shade cloth. But I only had so much PVC to utilize, so I had to ration it, and in some of these beds I only used 3 hoops or 4 hoops. The 4 hoop structure really helps a lot. When that snow came in, it put a lot of weight on these row covers, and the ones with only 3 hoops have really started to collapse from the ends. Some of the weight from that snow dipping down onto that bed could be pressing onto the plants. They can get burned when they make contact with that. They could be broken from the weight. Nonetheless, that is one of my observations that I wanted to share, that I think that 5 hoop design is great. If you only have 4, you're gonna do pretty well, and with 3 you can expect it to have some issues if you get some snow or ice. That's gonna be really important in your success getting through these types of events. I did have to let some things go. I simply didn't have enough room in this high tunnel greenhouse structure to bring all of my favorite plants in there. I assessed that they were commonly available plants. I realized I can probably get another one somewhere down the road. So if you're forced to prioritize your plants and protecting them, pick the ones that are more exotic, and certainly the ones that are tropical. They're gonna need all the protection that you can give them. So I know some people have been asking me on Instagram at New Garden Road, how have things made it? What are things looking like? I'm not looking yet. I'm not peeking. We have got a few more days of these sub-freezing temperatures. Things are really sealed up well with the snow that's on them now. That's providing a little bit more insulation. Behind me is a Bloom Sweet grapefruit tree. This specimen has been planted in ground for 9 years. It's one of my favorites. It's grown to a height of probably 12 to 15 feet. I was not able to put a bunch of row cover around this. It just would have been way too much for me to do. In hindsight, my only option other than what I did would have been to really cut it back, prune it back really hard to a size that I could have manageably covered. What I did was minimal, my strategy was this. All these citrus trees that I have are grafted onto a rootstock, and that rootstock makes them more adapted to our soil types and a little bit more adapted to cold temperatures. What's important to know is if this tree dies back unprotected, what is likely to resprout and regrow is going to come directly from the rootstock. And what I really want to protect is the actual graft itself, where that original scion was grafted onto the rootstock. That's the portion that's going to give me the Bloom Sweet grapefruit. So what I did was I mounted a bunch of pine straw around the base of that graft up above the graft point, and then I dropped in some incandescent Christmas lights. I don't know how much it was like 4 lines, so just everything that I had I put in there. After I dropped in those lights, I placed some row cover around the base, and I doubled that up so there's more than one layer, and I used some clips to try to cinch it up. Hopefully I'm trapping as much heat in and around that graft point as possible. The top of this tree does not look very good. I can tell it has been burned by these cold temperatures, and I think it's likely that I'm gonna lose all of this top growth. It's gonna be a couple years if I've managed to pull this off before I would anticipate having any fruit. So thankfully I was able to get all 19 of my container grown citrus trees inside. They're looking pretty happy. I gotta tell you, they make me happy. They fill me up. I'm so glad that I did that. I feel like I would have lost probably all of those trees if I had let them stay out here in my high tunnel greenhouse. When you have something that long that you cultivate, you really do form a connection with it. I think it's wise to consider accruing your resources off season, because some of these things can cost considerable amounts of money. If I'm looking at the row cover, that can be quite expensive to get everything that I need to double up coverage on all these beds. But that's not something I want to pay for out of pocket all at once. If you can manage to budget these resources and get them throughout the season, just prepare yourself in advance, and then when the time comes that I would need to go all out with these things, I'll have them here. I won't have to scramble, I won't have to get out on the road, and I won't have to spend money that I might not be prepared to spend. I took a chance by covering as much as I possibly could. It might have been wiser for me to say, you know what, under a single layer of row cover, these plants are not going to survive. So I'm going to reallocate that row cover to a bed and double it up and give these plants over here more of a fighting chance. You're going to have to make a decision. What's important to you? What do you want to prioritize? And that could pay off. As is, I really spread my resources out. At this point, we are on our 6th day of sub-freezing temperatures. It has not gotten above 32 degrees. All the same, I can't wait to open up some of these beds and see what has survived, if anything has survived. We've got another hard freeze tonight, and then it's supposed to break 40 tomorrow. Now, anything's possible. I know that I probably took some losses here, but fingers crossed, I've still come away with some garden food that I can continue to harvest and grow. Ready? Woohoo! Overall, I would say I'm really happy with how the vegetable garden pulled through, and I've been saying about 85% of it survived. That's just a rough estimate, but there is still plenty of viable food out here. Tons of carrots and kale. All my onions and my garlic pulled through really well, and I still have 3 different rounds of lettuce growing. I was really impressed with how these Napa cabbage pulled through. I harvested one already. The broccoli did seem to take a hit. There's still lots of side shoots forming though. So here you can see the bed where the calendulas, the daikon radish were decimated, along with the peas. Just as I suspected, my Bloom Sweet grapefruit has turned brown, but there are some green shoots at the bottom in that protected zone. The container grown citrus is so happy to be out in the sunshine, and I couldn't be more pleased at how it's come through. Still holding some fruit, gonna set up some more fruit and keep on growing. Hooray for citrus! There's an icicle above the microphone. Can you hear that? Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel, like this one for how to build a hoop house. You can grow your own food. Keep it organic.